The non-aggression principle, or the NEP, is often referred to by so-called anarcho-capitalists as the underlying principle behind their ideology. The objective of today's video is not to per se debunk this principle, but to instead reverse engineer it, if you will, into something that has better meaning. According to Wikipedia, the non-aggression principle is defined as follows. The non-aggression principle, or NAP, also called the non-aggression axiom, the anti-coercion zero-aggression principle, or non-initiation of force, is an ethical stance that asserts that aggression is inherently wrong. In this context, aggression is defined as initiating or threatening any forceful interference with an individual or individual's property. In contrast to pacifism, the non-aggression principle does not forbid forceful defense. The non-aggression principle is considered by some to be the defining principle of natural rights libertarianism. This sounds all well and good until you look into the nature of property. If I own something, I own something. It is mine, and unless I give explicit permission, no one else can use it. This seems all fine and normal, right? Well, when you consider the fact that we don't need one car for every person who wants to use one, when those cars are only used 5% of the time, property ownership creates a barrier to use for those without property. One of the reasons why access economics is superior to ownership economics is because it allows people to use goods and services at the point of need, regardless of their economic status. Since we can argue that property creates a barrier to use, and anyone breaking that barrier will be met supposedly with force against them, it soon becomes clear that the non-aggression principle isn't really about non-aggression at all, it's about protecting private property. Since those without property often suffer the consequences of poverty, which in turn leads to suffering and desperation, we can conclude that private property rights are a form of structural economic violence. This is not, as ANCAPs often say, non-aggression. It can't be. If there is a force stopping someone from accessing something, that is aggression in of itself. So, if the non-aggression principle doesn't really have that much meaning in the anarcho-capitalist sense, then how can it be better defined? Pardon me for quoting Gandhi here, but I think he said it best. Poverty is violence. If you deny people access to the necessities of life, all because they don't have the material means to do so, then those people are being structurally aggressed against. Violence is being committed against them, because the denial of access to the means of life creates suffering and distress. And that is what is meant by the quote, "Poverty is violence." If we are to create a society absent of structural violence and aggression, then it is entirely imperative that we eliminate poverty. Now I think it's time we give the non-aggression principle a new, more suitable definition. Violent, structural, behavioural is inherently aggressive. A non-aggressive society would lack fear, desperation, poverty, and suffering. And so it is a principled conclusion that a non-aggressive society would ensure the health and well-being of the people living within it. In order to achieve this goal, everyone must be nourished, sheltered, educated, and kept in good health. When people's basic needs are met, it is only then that we begin to move towards a society based on non-aggression, as the world's people will no longer feel the anxiety and the suffering which they do today. In this video I've talked about structural violence in relation to non-aggression. However, there is another side to the coin, and that is concerning behavioural violence. The majority of crime committed today is the result of an underlying structure that has led to that crime. The war on drugs creates a black market for the aforementioned. Believe it or not, people are economically incentivized to rob and steal from others. And I'm sure you will find somewhere, somehow, our current socio-economic structures have propagated the conditions for violent crime to occur. The aggressive way of quote-unquote solving this issue is to lock every assailant up and throw away the key. This not only destroys the morale and the hope of rehabilitation for the assailant, but it also ignores the underlying structures at play that increase the propensity of malign behaviour to take place. You never fix a problem by hiding away from it, and that is exactly what we're doing right now. This is evidenced by how England and Wales have the highest imprisonment rate in Western Europe, and the USA has the highest incarceration rate in the world, and yet violence is still rife within these societies. So then, what would be a non-aggressive solution? There are many non-violent ways of doing justice that are in practice today. Countries like Norway and Finland are renowned for their rehabilitation efforts, and this has made Norway in particular a country with one of the lowest recidivism rates in the world. But this isn't the only option, however, although there are things like restorative justice and ostracism ostracism in a society based on natural law, I imagine we would take a different approach. If we want to reduce malign behaviour in our society, we must look at the root cause of it. Despite what the general populace thinks, people committing crimes isn't a sign they're a bad person, but instead a sign of a societal problem that needs to be remedied. I will touch up on this in more detail in a future video, because I think it deserves its own. But this is all I have time for now. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more content from me, please subscribe to this channel. I've been Adam Jones, and until next time, this is me signing off.